This piece of Mahenge Garnet was well priced due to it having an inclusion in it that the seller told me about. So upon examining it, I decided to go ahead and take a chance on this piece of rough. My preference is to buy rough with no inclusions, and then occasionally get disappointments as inclusions show up that I did not detect in examining the rough. So normally, if I know the stone has an inclusion, I pass it up. Except in this case where Steve Yu has discounted the stone due to the inclusion. Who knows? I might get lucky with this piece and end up not losing much rough in working out this inclusion. So for this stone, I will cut BOPIE'S favorite round design, the Portuguese cut, which is also my favorite round design for gemstones. There are a number of Portuguese cut designs available to use, but because the Mahenge Garnet has a refractive index of between 1.76 and 1.77, I think that the design called the Graham Portuguese is a perfect fit. This design was created by the late Jeff Graham, and yes, I do cut a lot of Jeff's designs. They are awesome. Most of Jeff's designs are not available to the public domain for cutters to cut unless you buy the book they are published in, but Jeff did release about 3 dozen of his favorite designs into the public domain for all cutters to freely use. The Graham Portuguese design is in the public domain, and I explain in a previous video how to go back in time on the internet to access Jeff's old website and download this and other designs, as well as accessing all of the articles Jeff wrote about gem cutting. Here's the video where you can find Jeff's designs. If I cut this stone correctly, it should look like this from the top, side, and bottom. Okay, I'm using my 320 grit topper. I'm just kind of preforming our stone, and I've already brought it down to, there's that inclusion. So I'm going to cut that out, and then I still have a little ways to go to make the temporary center point. I'm not cutting every 6 teeth, which is what the instructions call, the 96, the 6, 12, 18. Starting out just cutting the 4 main teeth, the 96, the 24, the 48, and the 72. And in a couple of cases, I cut some other ones just as I was going along, just to see how it was going, because I was a little bit worried about like this low spot here that I'll work on. So there's no need to cut every facet when you're just getting the preforming done. Again, what I'm trying to do is cut enough so that the inclusion goes away and make my temporary center point. Because the Portuguese cut has significantly more facets and rows of facets than a standard round brilliant, pale to light gem rough makes a better candidate for the Portuguese cut than dark rough does. And in the case of this Mahenge Garnet, I think it's going to be a perfect match. In the jewelry trade, there's a difference between color shift and color change, and the difference really depends on the magnitude of the color change. A dramatic color change and going to different colors, like you see with alexandrite, is called color change. A slight change, or staying within the same color or grouping of colors, like going from a pink to a red, that would be called a color shift. There's no real agreement on how dramatic the change has to be to call it color change versus color shift. But in the case of this Mahenge Garnet, which goes from peach to purple, I'm going to go with color change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, I finished polishing the bottom half of the pavilion of our Mahenge Garnet, which is, we now know is a color change or color shift garnet. Nice surprise. I polished it with the aluminum oxide Spectra Ultralapse, and had no problem polishing it up. Now we'll transfer it and work on the top half of the stone. Okay, I removed the top from my Mahenge Garnet, and this was the first time that I've used the DevCon 2-part epoxy. For a couple years I've used the JB Weld, and I will say that in removing the epoxy, the DevCon is definitely hard as a rock. So I mean, that was one of the issues. Somebody told me they didn't like that I was using the JB Weld because it's kind of soft, and they thought that would cause stones to pop off the DOP. It didn't. I used it for 2 years. It never had a problem. But I will say it's much. It's going to take a different technique, I guess, to get the epoxy off the stones with this DevCon because it's so much harder. With the JB Weld, I would just, I cut it and kind of peel it off like you'd peel the orange peel off of an orange. So that won't work with this DevCon. So I'm still evaluating the DevCon. I'll work with it for a while. It's definitely great stuff. It definitely holds a stone. Not sure that I don't like the JB Weld better, but we'll see. This is just the first try. Okay, so the way we make sure our stone is set properly in our Ultratech is that we use the girdle, and on this stone, they're at the 96 tooth, there's a flat facet, and every 6 facets, every 6 teeth after that, there's a flat facet. So you just set your tooth at 96, you set your angle at 90, you run the stone down till it's on just touching this flat piece of metal that's perfectly flat, perfectly squared, and then you raise it up just a little bit, and as it raises up, it should break, that facet should break the contact with the metal all along the facet. There shouldn't be one part of the facet sticking up, or else you're not at exactly the right tooth. So once you get it flat, and then you just set your set screw, and your top and your bottom are in alignment, and you can continue to facet. And then just want to check. So this garnet, kind of a peachy color under this light, or kind of a purplish under this light. So it's a color shift. It is color shift Mahenge Garnet, which is good. All right, so now we can cut the top half of our stone. Okay, I finished pre-polishing our Mahenge Garnet with 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and now I'm going to use the my Crystallite tin lap with aluminum oxide and see if that polishes up the crown, and then we'll have the table left to do. I finished polishing the crown of our stone with my aluminum lap with cerium oxide, and now we have to polish the table. So I've taken the DOP out of our Ultratech machine, set the angle for 45 degrees, installed my 45 degree tabling adapter, which gives me a 90 degree angle, and just make sure it's flat. So we put our DOP into our tabling adapter, tighten up the set screw, and we're now set up to cut and polish the table of our Mahenge Garnet. So I'll use 3000 diamond on a bat lap because we're very close to the table right now, and then finish polishing it with the aluminum lap with cerium oxide. I finished polishing the table of our Mahenge Garnet, and now I'll put it in the acetone and remove it from the DOP so we can weigh it and measure it and then send it off to BOPIE. I really like the Portuguese cut and the way this stone turned out. Again, my rule of thumb is to pass on rough that has inclusions like this one did, but I made an exception upon examining this stone because the seller had priced it with an inclusion, and I felt that in this case I could work around the inclusion without significantly losing a lot of rough. Plus, I received a super surprise bonus when this Mahenge Garnet turned out to actually be a color change Mahenge. a very pleasant surprise. I'm also continuing to evaluate the epoxy that I use, JB Weld versus the Defcon 2-part epoxy. I'm a big fan of JB Weld, but decided to go with Devcon and give it a try for the next year or so. Devcon definitely sets up like a rock hard level, while JB Weld was more malleable, but both held the stone in place, which at the end of the day is what matters. So I'll continue to evaluate the Devcon. Let me know what you think of the final stone here. Happy fastening, everyone.